Thunderstruck. Oh, what am I doing? Okay. Oh, my goodness. Oh, I guess I need to turn on the projector, don't I? Okay. All right, let's guess I'll dim the lights. Oh, this chair makes me laugh specifically because it's the grossest, oldest chair in the world, but they have it tied to the wall with like a steel cable so no one steals it. And I'm like, I don't understand why this chair is so special to them, but there we go. Oh, now see, I turned the lights down to enable your napping. That's what I'm doing. I turned the lights down to help you nap. It's all good. Okay, so we're in a little bit of a weird position in terms of content to time ratio. So it's and here's where I start putting, like, I'm a NHL coach. I start putting stuff in the blender. I'll answer that in a sec. So I'm going to try to get through work. Depending on where we end up today, we might have time for another very brief unit before the midterm, but probably not. So we're probably going to finish up with work. We'll see how the pacing goes, and maybe like Friday's class, we might not use the full hour. I don't want to, because obviously Monday will be review, right? And Q&A, you guys can ask questions, and we won't add any new content on Monday. And then Wednesday is the midterm, the second midterm. So it's looking like second midterm is going to be families, education, and work. So I basically, if you go in the folder for the lectures, I took out sexuality and religion. We're going to move those to the final. And I've moved in crime, and it's a very short unit. If today I end up just speeding through everything, and we have a bunch of extra time just to go through, it won't take very long to do crime. But probably not. I'm going to endeavor not to add too much extra content here. Especially, I don't want to rush through stuff and then have people feel a little bit unsteady about it. So, will there be any office hours before second midterm? Okay, so definitely I am available tomorrow. I'm a little bit unsure as to the exact timing of it. My kids are off on teachers' convention, so it kind of throws things into the blender for me. But I can definitely, for certain, do online. If you want to do an online review, that's super easy no matter where I am. I might be on campus Friday after 1 p.m. I have to pick up my son at 3, but basically from 1 until 2:30, I will be around. And next Tuesday, I'll be on campus the whole day. So we just have to, have you come in. I think that's everything. So we're going to jump in. I like this person's comment, and I have a brief but related story that ends with me getting fired, but ultimately also ends up with me winning. So one of my first jobs that I had, I was in high school, and I was the bag boy at Safeway in Collingwood. Possibly the worst Safeway in the entire universe, I will say. It is gross and super busy, and the managers were jerks. And someone, for whatever reason, had a poop-related accident and had left poop in the aisles, right? And then went into the bathroom and just sprayed human poop everywhere. And the manager was like, "Yeah, you need to clean that." And I'm like, no. Well, seriously, dude, I'm a bag boy. In my contract that I signed, it says my duties include helping customers and collecting carts. And I can tell you that it does not include scrubbing a bathroom that's coated in poo. And the manager's like, well, you're going to do it or I'm going to fire you. And I'm like, fine, whatever. See ya. And I did not finish my shift. I punched out and I never went back to work for Safeway ever again. And I feel like I won that interaction because cleaning human poop is not fun. And yes, customer service is very, very stressful, and I feel bad for anyone who has to do it on a regular basis. Professors kind of do customer service, except I'm in the position of power, so I like this much better. But trust me when I say, I certainly had my, apparently I'm stuck in a doom loop here. What's going on? I got trapped. I did my share of terrible customer service experiences in my life. All right. This is not the slide I wanted to end up on. I know, I'm going to fix it. Give me a second. All right, we got stuck in a doom loop, but we're all better now. I don't know what's happening. I know I'm fixing the projector. My computer decides every time I hit escape that it no longer wants to project things, and I just have to hit the project panel on Windows. There we go. Okay. So here's where we ended off, right? We ended off talking about stress. That was where the poop-related comment came from, and I tell you my interesting. I'm in a doom loop. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete a few things here so as not to end up in the doom loop. Oh, everyone who's at home is like, what is happening? Why is my professor insane? All right, we're going to try this again. Hopefully we don't end up in the doom loop. All right, try this one more time. We're going to close PowerPoint and try this again. Sorry about this. Windows acting funny on the day. And now I've lost the class completely. Anyone know any good jokes? That is... Well, I can go forward now. Good times had by all. Just have to go all the way back to where I was. Okay. All right, we're back. We're back. I'm sorry. Okay. All right, quiet down. You're not getting my screen-based shh. All right, there we go. Okay, so we were talking about kind of macroeconomic conditions as well. One of the things that happened, especially starting in the 2000s, is that companies with younger workers especially started to basically try to bring younger workers into entry-level positions using internships. So things like, in disciplines like engineering, co-ops became very popular, right? These low-paying starter positions that were basically premised on the idea of, you get some experience and you get to make industry contacts because you're in an internship, right? So internships, more and more young people basically from the 2000s tried to start entering unpaid or low-paid internships as a way of entering the job market. This too is a little bit fraught, right? So it promises lots of good things. Like I said, references, right? You've now worked for a boss, so no one can say, well, you have no experience. Networking opportunities, you're out in the world of, say, engineering or finance, right? My boss, the chair of our department, Kevin Haggerty, his son currently is off in Calgary doing a business internship because he's in the School of Business. So, these sorts of things happen. He gets paid a little bit to do it. You get networking opportunities because you're now out in industry and you're meeting people. and you get to actually build on the job skills. Now, one of the big problems with internships is they often, promise or sort of imply that, hey, if things go well, maybe we'll keep you on or something like that. However, it's very seldom that people actually go from internships directly into paid work. The media industry, before it started its complete and utter collapse, and maybe it's still this way, used to run a lot of things on internships. I had a few friends who had gone and done like journalism at Carleton, where I think at NAIT they had a broadcasting program, and basically they would do internships at radio and TV stations, right? And basically the idea was, if things go well, we'll see how it goes. Very, very seldom, did it actually turn into paid work. And the same thing, I had lots of friends work for engineering firms. And, mostly at the end of the day, what happened was, thank you, it's really nice, you're wonderful, we'd be happy to give you the reference, but we're going to hire another low-paid intern to take your place because that's what we would prefer. So, one of the things that does happen too with internships is they are somewhat class selective in terms of socioeconomic class, because often with the low pay or the no paid internships, one of the things that you end up having to do is either, you need to be supported by someone. So you need to have parents or other relatives that are supportive that can essentially pay your living expenses while you are working at this internship. Or you need to have a part-time job on top. So it's not uncommon to hear of people doing especially unpaid internships who are then working, 70 plus hours. My pen is being goofy. 70 plus hours a week, because they go to their internship from 9 to 5, and then from 6 to 10 or 6 to 11, they're working at some other job, often in kind of the service industry. Waiting tables is a pretty common one. So it is really class dependent, right? If you are from a lower socioeconomic strata and you're already having trouble scraping by, it can be really difficult to make internships work. You often need that support from parents. And so if this is, if internships are the path, I don't know what I was going to draw on there. I'm going to put my pen away. If internships are the path, to experience, it creates a class selective bias, right? It's only the people that can really go into internships that have, the support networks to go in, that can take advantage of internships fully to get those references, to get that networking, which means, again, people from that kind of working class, lower socioeconomic strata, even, lower kind of middle class, can struggle in these sorts of positions. And there's all sorts of other challenges that come with it, right? Getting to internships, transport could be a challenge, and all of these sorts of things can make it really difficult for people from, a lower socioeconomic strata to make these things work. Okay, harassment in the workplace. All right. So it's less common than it used to be. I mean, it used to be very common, right? If you watch something like the AMC TV series Mad Men, about the ad industry in New York, starting in the 1950s, sexual harassment not only used to be, pretty common, but kind of almost expected in the workplace. And thankfully, culture has changed considerably. We don't see as much of it. And now there are obviously laws and kind of HR regulations that should govern harassment, though it still definitely happens. So yeah, it still occurs at a pretty high rate, and 87% of women and some much smaller percentage of men, it's about 15%, report some type of sexual harassment during their working years. Now, it does tend to have certain patterns. So the most common kind of age bracket for harassment is for women, about 15 to 25. Before which, obviously, you're not working. But as soon as women, especially young women, enter the workplace, they're often subjected to some kind of sexual harassment. Now, this can be customers, right, sexually harassing people, or other employees. And it seems to taper off about 25 for the most part. A lot of people are moving into higher level positions by that point, out of kind of direct customer service. And more people are becoming romantically attached. And that's the other pattern that's really important. Single women. Single women are much more likely to be harassed by a coworker or boss than women who are in relationships or are married. So as you move forward in this age bracket, that 15 to 25, obviously, more people become attached, get romantic partners. Some percentage of them get married. And then those rates of harassment tend to go down because sort of predatory people, not as much like on the customer side, but on the coworker or boss side, will tend to target people who are already single. Okay, so 2 types of sexual harassment that we can talk about, both of which are serious. This one, so quid pro quo, essentially means this for that. This is the kind of sexual harassment where essentially someone, usually a superior will, a boss or someone you're hoping will be your boss, basically offers to exchange sex or some kind of sexual favors in exchange for a raise, a new position, continued employment, advancement, or getting the job, right? So, when you have people who, so to speak, slept their way into a new position or slept their way to the top, usually it's because it starts out in sort of this, right? It's quid pro quo. Some person in a position of authority basically says, sleep with me and, we'll get you that promotion. And, unfortunately, it remains relatively common. I've had a few friends, and a few enemies, actually, now that I think of it, who are offered, I don't actually have any enemies. They're all dead. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. I've never killed anyone that you know of, that they can prove. Terrible joke. I shouldn't make those kinds of jokes. I'm going to get myself in trouble. I'm sure, given my activities in the Center for Criminological Research, I'm already on some kind of watch list. So I honestly, we're researching like people who are exiting prison, and I'm the person, and we survey them, the day before they get out, 10 days later, and then 6 weeks later, and then for a whole year at different intervals. And I'm the person that has the bank account to pay them. So I'm transferring sums of money to people who just got out of prison. Several of them, as I've learned, who've had their bank accounts basically flagged for financial fraud. And so I'm like 100% getting arrested at some point. Please come through the door. If some of you could throw yourselves at them while I go out that way, that'd be great. So yeah, I'm probably on some watch list. I shouldn't joke on YouTube about murdering people. I've never murdered anyone. But I've had friends, right? Good friends of mine, women, who basically the boss was like, hey, there's 2 people applying for this position. If you want it, maybe, we could go have dinner. And obviously they didn't do it because they're not like that. But, it definitely still happens. So that's quid pro quo, right? And it happens remarkably frequently, especially men in positions of authority and power can use that authority and power, to try and get something that they want. Okay. The poisoned work environment is a little bit more complicated to explain, but it definitely exists in large quantities as well. It's less tolerated than it used to be, but pretty normal. So poisoned work environment or a toxic work environment, either term essentially works, and both terms are used in kind of HR literature, is basically any environment where a person is made to feel uncomfortable in the environment, right? And a whole range of things can make a work environment poisoned or toxic. So like this, right? That, Ted from accounting comes down and you're trying to show him something on some spreadsheet because for some reason, after your sociology degree, you became an accountant. I don't know. It happens. I have 2 cousins who, did other things and then were like, one went into nursing, did it for like 5 years, and I was like, you know what? I think I want to look at numbers in very tiny boxes all day instead, which I sort of get. But, he puts his hand on your shoulder and it makes you feel kind of uncomfortable, right? So that would be a kind of poisoned work environment. If this person does that a lot, Things like pet names, right? If they, give you a name, they call you sweetie or sugar or I don't know what else, um, honey, whatever it happens to be, and that makes you uncomfortable, that would constitute a poisoned or toxic work environment. Jokes that are told, maybe sexualized jokes in the workplace, that would, and it's done where you can hear it and it makes you uncomfortable. That's a poisoned work environment. It used to be back in the day, I remember this especially, I'll tell you all my work history. You could totally commit identity fraud and steal my identity because every place I've ever worked now. In university, I worked in construction in the summers, and I remember right in the, as actually like NREF, the resources building in engineering, I built part of it, not a big part, but part of it. And, I remember the workers, they would put up the sunshine girl from the Edmonton Sun, or sometimes, images of nude women were up in the lunchroom. This also would constitute a poisoned work environment, right? Because that would sexualize the work environment and potentially make women, and maybe some men in that work environment, feel very uncomfortable. So anything like that, anything that you can imagine that makes people consistently uncomfortable to be at work and feel like they're targeted potentially for, race, for gender, sexuality, anything like that could constitute a poisoned work environment. That's all harassment in the workplace. Okay, especially for women, right? Work is often sexualized. And I can proudly say that I have never been to the Cactus Club, and God willing, I will never go to the Cactus Club because I have standards. The Cactus Club does not meet them. I also refuse to go to Moxie's, Earl's, or Boston Pizza, except with my kids because they eat the fettuccine noodles, which I could easily make at home and mine are better, but whatever. That's neither here nor there. Right, but think of Cactus Club and any of these kind of chain restaurants, right, where you walk in and, the servers, especially the female ones, are dressed in such a way as to, how shall we say, emphasize certain physical features. Right, this is a kind of sexualized work. And again, I've had friends of mine, even in engineering firms, right, so people who had education, be told by their superiors, you should dress nicer at work, right? It would be nice, undo the top button, if you will. I actually did have a friend who was told that, and it was like, okay. So work for women is often, sexualized, especially attractiveness can be judged as a quality in hiring. This is most common in the service industry. I remember I had a friend who was busing at, I think it was at Moxie's at the time. Sorry, it was the 2000s. Moxie's, I think, was still a thing. And so she had the dubious job of taking the resumes from anyone who happened to come in and hand in a resume looking for a job. And her manager had told her that for, how shall we say, the less attractive people who came in looking for a job, that she should write 110 on them. Oh, my zero got broken. But basically 110 was a way of the manager knowing that this person was not attractive enough to work at Moxie's because, draw a little vertical bar there and it spells no. And that was, one of the hiring criterias at Moxie's back in the day. Like, is this person physically attractive, right? So we see this a lot, especially for young women, again, probably in this 15 to 25 kind of profile, and especially in the service industry. Okay. How am I doing for time? Oh, just the worst, which works out really well for all of you. Oh, technical glitches and all that jazz and a little bit of storytelling. Off we go to the races. I'm going to ask you questions about my work history on the exam. How closely were you paying attention to my life? That's what I want to know. Oh, that should be a bonus question. I should throw that on as a bonus question. Oh, sorry. I'm a terrible, terrible person. I'm hoping that Canvas, when we have, because one of the problems, I used to have bonus questions on all my exam that were random shit from my life. And once I moved everything online, it's much harder to do bonus questions because eClass is not flexible. But maybe with the move to Canvas, I'll be able to add bonus questions again. Okay, so workplace safety. Young people are at the highest risk of getting injured on the job. So when we see workplace injuries, most of them are for the youngest workers. Okay, so why? Well, I mean, this one is important, right? They are seldom unionized. It's a very small percent, like low double digits, something like 12% of workers, in their 20s, teens and 20s that are working in a unionized workplace. Now, for whatever you think of unions, unions are pretty good at assuring safe working conditions most of the time. And certainly if something is problematic, you can report it to the union and they, at least in theory, can address it with management, right? And it's usually worked out in collective bargaining agreements that there are certain kind of safety standards for work. So not being unionized means that often when they're asked to do something either potentially dangerous or injurious, young workers often feel like they don't have a choice. Okay, usually the jobs are pretty unskilled. And these kind of go together. So again, when you're looking at getting into the job market, right, and you're moving into this sort of McJob area of the service sector, most of that work is pretty unskilled, right? Whether it's, stacking shelves at Safeway, flipping burgers, making lattes, washing cars, whatever it happens to be, it's usually not particularly skilled. And so, there's often very little safety training that goes along with it. Now, part of that is, because it's quite unskilled, it's kind of assumed by employers that it doesn't need to happen. The other thing is that because they assume high turnover in a lot of these jobs, they're going to often check a box in terms of safety training, but they want to put as little time into safety training as possible. So I always remember this because when I already know I worked at Safeway. I remember when I worked at Safeway. So I got hired. I wish I hadn't, but I did. I got hired. And I signed the paperwork, and then they stuck me in an office with a laptop, and they played a video on the laptop. It was very old, it's back in the 2000s, and it was their safety training video, right? And so it was like, lift with your knees if you're lifting heavy objects. What happens if you get into a confrontation with a coworker? I swear to God, the entire safety training for Safeway was about 15 minutes, right? That was the whole of the safety training that I received. No one ever showed me how to lift things properly. And I had a number of coworkers who were classmates of mine who were also working there, particularly the ones stocking shelves, who injured their backs, right? Because they were basically being asked to lift these really heavy things, put them on shelves, and they weren't doing it properly. So they actually did hurt themselves. Even though Safeway was unionized at the time, they didn't really go for WCB or anything like that. They should have. I know that now. But Safeway, I think, assumed that, like me, because I have a terrible attitude, I've already told you this, there was going to be pretty high turnover, right? People quit from the kind of stalker and bag boy jobs on a regular basis. And so they want to kind of minimize the amount of training they're giving you so that they can just put you to work as fast as possible and they're not spending a lot of money on training you, right? Because even that 15 minutes that they paid me, I had already checked in, right? So they were already paying me for that time. I think minimum wage at the time was like $7.85 an hour. So if you think you got it bad, I was asked to clean up poop for $7.85 an hour, and I quit my job instead of doing it. Okay, another one. A lot of the jobs that young people work in, and this is particularly true in kind of the restaurant and hospitality industries, are what are called just-in-time working conditions. So basically, just-in-time is any sort of workplace where essentially you're producing things not in advance, but you're producing things as required. Okay, so so if you exclude Burger King, because Burger King is gross, that will be the bonus question. What is the worst fast food I've ever had? It was Burger King. It was in Billings, Montana. I know that's random, but in Billings, Montana, at a truck stop, after my wife had left our passports at a ice cream shop and her purse and all of these things 100 miles away. So she was having a panic attack in the parking lot, and I took the kids to eat at Burger King, and it was the worst food on earth. I'd rather eat my shoe. And I've learned since then that Burger King makes food in advance and just keeps it under heat lamps, which is a thing. Most other fast food places like McDonald's produce things just in time, right? So when you show up at, 11:45 at McDonald's and you order a Big Mac because you hate yourself and want to die, I have opinions. Have I told you I've taken like 18 culinary classes at NAIT, and so I like produce food at home. It's like chef grade, and so eating fast food makes me want to cry. And yet my kids still like the chicken nuggets at McDonald's more than the ones I make with actual chicken, and it hurts me. Anyway, right, so you order your chicken nuggets or you order your Big Mac, and they basically make them right away, right? They make them fresh. So and this is a strategy from McDonald's, right? Why? Because they don't want to produce a bunch of food in advance and end up throwing a lot of it away. So if you produce things just in time, you can avoid a lot of waste. And McDonald's is pretty good at this, right? Even though McDonald's, at any given McDonald's on any given day, McDonald's could tell you, because they have all the metrics, how many burgers they sold, in what time frame. And yet they still produce them, on demand more so than making stuff in advance. And they've got a very high-tech way of doing it. Because they don't want to waste a lot of food. Now, what happens with just-in-time working conditions is they tend to be pretty chaotic, right? Especially if you think about, say, like the hospitality industry, restaurants, fast food and slower food restaurants as well. Most of the business is concentrated within a relatively small pocket of time, right? Most of the lunch business for McDonald's is going to run between about 11 and 1. After which there's a huge taper off in terms of how many people are eating there, which means you're having to produce the most food within that period, which means that period is extremely chaotic in the back of a McDonald's or any fast food restaurant, any restaurant anywhere, right? The lunch rush is super chaotic. So what happens is people will tend to get injured during that time, because when you're stressed and when things get chaotic is when you put the safety rules out the window, right? So you start kind of freeballing with the deep fryer, right? And what happens, you get splashed with hot grease. Things don't get done that would, absolutely help people not get injured in the kitchen, or people are moving through, running into each other, knocking things over, getting grease on them. By the way, number 1 workplace injury for young people. Grease burns. Grease burns in kitchens, right? That is the number 1 workplace injury for young people, is a grease burn. So if you've ever worked in hospitality and you've gotten a grease burn, congratulations, you are in the majority. Woo! Grease burns. Okay, so any kind of conditions that are chaotic, just in time, right? These are places where people tend to get injured, especially in those peak demand times. And because young people tend to work in a lot of these industries, right, that's their part-time job, they get injured in these places. And I mean, I say woo, grease burns. Grease burns can be quite severe and nasty. So definitely, avoid that. Put on the rubber aprons if you're dealing with grease, because it hurts like heck. Okay, the other one, subject that young people tend to be the ones most likely to be subjected to crime, especially robberies, where someone may injure them because of it. So, I mean, this is, basically in retail, and especially retail places that are open late. Convenience stores, liquor stores are prime targets for robbery. And, any young person who potentially gets in the way of someone who's attempting to steal something can put themselves on the path to being quite severely injured. I know, because I remember I went into the liquor store near my house one day, and it was late, and I was like, why are you even open? Right? It was like, I don't know why I was there. Probably having a bad day, or something. I was marking student papers, so I needed something to drink. I'm kidding. I never drink when I mark. I drink long before and long after. I'm so kidding. And why are they open? And they're like, yeah, we don't know either, because they said that basically what happens is around 1 a.m. Basically people come in and they start just like grabbing cases of beer or bottles of liquor and just walking out. And they've been told basically like, just whatever you do, stay out of their way. The liquor's insured, you're not. Which is really nice that the company they work for insured the liquor but not the workers, right? What kindness. So that tends to happen, right? And if you try to interfere, they could harm you in serious ways. And this happens, and again, especially in situations where young people are working, especially working alone late at night, robberies in retail tend to be more common than you might think. Okay, and young people often get blamed for their own problems. Oh, he hurt his back. Well, it's because he wasn't lifting with his knees, right? Or, oh, he didn't follow the safety protocols at the McDonald's deep fryer area, and all of these sorts of things. Now, a lot of times, right, you're ignoring them because your employer sort of pushes you to ignore them, or you weren't properly trained. But in a lot of cases with young people getting injured on the job, they're blamed for their own problems. I used to never write on my slides, and now I kind of love it. I don't know why. Smiley face. This is me. I have hair. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm in a random mood today. It's like middle of the semester, and I'm like, I've lost my mind. Okay. So, education and work. Generally it's been, people have sort of thought, especially once you get into university, that working in university was sort of a good thing, right? You would gain job experience and show your reliability, right? Shake that stigma of being flaky while you were getting your education. However, what we see, if we want to talk about the literature, and you can bring this to your boss, you can say, I learned this in my class. I need to work less than 20 hours a week. Any work over about 20 hours a week, especially in menial or boring jobs, tends to cause, progressive declines in academic performance. So every hour you go over 20 hours a week will tend to cause about a 1 to 2% decline in your grades, right? So, especially, again, if the job is boring and menial. Fewer hours, right? More interesting work, and you don't see, you see more positive outcomes, especially in, people having a little bit of spending money and a little bit of ability to support themselves, and not having that decline in academic outcomes, right? So more than 20 hours tends to be a problem. Less than 20 hours, you tend to be okay. And this is just math, right? So when you combine school and work, right, if you're working more than 20 hours, let's say you're spending 30 to 40 hours a week on your schoolwork, and you're working 20 or more hours a week, you could be, basically spending, between 50 and 60 hours per week working, which is just way too much, right? You don't have enough downtime, leisure time, or any of those things to kind of recover and do really well and hit your peak performance, and probably you're eating bad food and not working out enough and all of those things. And just, average adult work week, once you get into the workforce, is somewhere between 37 and 40 hours. So, you might be working as much as double what an average adult works if you're working and going to school. And I know you're young, but you're still not invincible. But you do have all your hair, so that helps. Okay. No idea how many slides are left. Oh. All right, I feel like I've talked about this since the beginning of the course, and now I have a whole slide on it. So educational inflation, we talked about it a little bit when we talked about education, right? But it matters in the workforce as well. Increasingly, those entry-level positions are requiring more and more school, right? So jobs that really in the past didn't require any kind of post-secondary, you could have just walked off the, out of high school and gotten those jobs. Increasingly, they're looking for some kind of post-secondary degree. It's like Enterprise Rent-A-Car, right? I told you my Enterprise Rent-A-Car story. They only hired people with bachelor's degrees or at least a 2-year degree in something. And to this day, I cannot figure out why, because I was washing cars. I was wearing a suit while doing it, but it required nothing, I'm not too sarcastic when I say a monkey could have done it. A monkey, a well-trained monkey, could have done it. And if you'd given them bananas, they would have been nicer to the customers than I was. Because I'm a terrible, terrible person. I hope we've established that by now. I have no enemies for reasons I won't say, and I'm a bad employee. You've had this, and this, kind of started in the 2010s. People started saying this. I don't know, maybe it was because I was doing my master's in the 2010s, and people were like, yeah, the master's is the new bachelor's. Maybe that was our way of making ourselves feel better. But I think what we've seen is a continuous trend, right? We've seen, like in the US, what we saw was as a sort of trend, okay, if you had a bachelor's degree, you could get a good job. Okay, well, now it was, if you had a bachelor's degree from a good college, well, that was your path into a great job. Well, now if you had a bachelor's degree from an Ivy League college, that was your immediate pathway into a good job. Now it's, if you have a master's degree or some kind of postgraduate degree, that's what you need to get into that really elite tier of the job market, right? Where you're doing really, really well. So, increasingly as more and more people have that university education, right? As 2/3 of millennials and an equal share of Gen Z, I don't want to depress you, but I'm sure I am. Get that. We see more and more people getting master's degrees. Why? Because the BA or the BEd or the BSc or even the BSc in engineering isn't enough of a differentiator anymore. And as more people have it, right, it's not as good a sorting mechanism. And that's really in some ways what the BA used to be. It was a sorting mechanism to say to employers, wow, this person is very reliable, very smart, right? They can do tasks, right? They can keep to a schedule. But as university standards have changed and more people have bachelor's degrees, right? And unless you ask for transcripts, you don't know whether that was a A student or a C's get degrees student. They do, by the way, get degrees. Employers have shifted and they're like, okay, well now I want more. I want to see that it's a better school, right? I want to see that it's a better program at that school, or I want to see a postgraduate degree of some kind. This is my enterprise rent-a-car. Sad. Low-skill jobs are demanding people with post-secondary degrees. So it's become the base credential, right? We call that educational inflation. And increasingly, part of it is why, we talked about that shift in Gen X, right? Where Gen X, shifted from a university education was there to develop a meaningful philosophy of life. That was the baby boomer and the kind of silent generation way of thinking. As Gen X shifted to the bachelor's degree is a way of making more money, more people went into it, right? And it became less about, bettering yourself, discovering what you were passionate about, or anything like that, and more about, I just want to get a job. I need a job, and I know that to get a good job, I need a bachelor's degree. And so it became just the credential, right? It is just about getting that credential so that you can get a good job, so that you can, have a future in this environment that's increasingly competitive and where there's more and more people running around with those degrees, right? The undergraduate degree now is more of just a credential, and it's very much what the high school diploma used to be. The high school diploma used to be that thing that we used to say you're basically smart enough to function in the economy, right? And you're all very smart, you're all wonderful. But increasingly, right, how the market uses it is that's the base credential to say this person can show up for 4 years, finish assignments on time, hopefully. Although, not always. I had an exam on Monday. 3 grandmothers died tragically over the weekend. I shouldn't laugh at people's pain, except that, okay, I don't know if I've ever told you. I probably haven't. I had, one of my first years of teaching, I had one person who had 3 grandmothers die in the course of the same semester. I'm like, so like on the first midterm, the second midterm, and the third, and the final, they had their grandmother die each time. And I'm like, how many grandmothers do you have? I feel like too many. And they're like, oh, well, it's more my aunt that I call my grandmother. I'm like, oh, is that so? Okay, well, we'll go with that. Yes, the tragic. Sometimes people don't complete things on time and their grandmothers die as a result. It's the craziest thing. Sometimes they do actually die, but that's neither here nor there. I've never asked for a death certificate. I just joke about it in class. I'm sorry if your grandmother died before midterm. Okay, so yeah, I mean, this educational inflation and this credentialism just means that what's going to happen, right? Already you're facing a kind of job environment where you're probably, for those really top tier jobs to get into that field you really want to be in, you may need a master's degree of some kind. And trust me, even the difference in 10 years of teaching, right? Okay, I do teach a lot more students today than I taught in the past, but I get so many requests for letters today for so many programs, much more than when I started teaching. Tons and tons of people requesting letters to get into some kind of postgraduate program. Because, the bachelor's degree just doesn't carry the weight that it used to. Oh, I've got 3 more slides. I need to save them for next time so I have something to do on Friday, so I don't have to introduce you to another subject. 3 minutes. Let's stop there. This is way too much information on one slide. We're gonna go with that. Okay, we'll stop there. We'll come back. We'll finish talking about work on Friday, and we'll go from there. However long it takes. I don't think we'll have time for crime, and then Monday will be just Q&A before the midterm. And yeah, if you want to see your midterm and you haven't yet, shoot me an email. Like I said, I should be available tomorrow. Might be online Friday after 1, and Tuesday all day next week, Tuesday. So, all right, we will see you then.